April 1991 was the year in which an event would forever change the way in which I would see life again, something that the material world doesn't understand. At the time I was a soldier in the aeronautics department and served in the regional air command in the state of Para. As a 19-year-old young man newly arrived from the interior of the state without any financial and housing structure, I had no other choice. The only option was to live in the barracks. In my conversations with other soldiers I met a first-class soldier named Valois who was a musician. He helped me a lot in difficult times and he was the one who contributed a lot to my joining the barracks music band. He gave me a lot of motivation to be part of the Air Command Bugler Board. One day when talking to my friend Valois about my problems with living in the barracks, we talked about the hours, the food, stress that was that endless and the routine. Being aware of my situation with a gesture of friendship, Valois asked me, "Are you willing to leave barracks and come to live with us?" At that moment I was surprised and at the same time happy to hear this, because that was all I wanted to hear. After so many months in that never-ending routine of the barrack with a big smile I accepted to join Valois with his two cousins, sister and friend. We agreed to split the rent. Everything happened very quickly. I picked up my few belongings and filled the old backpack and I left towards freedom. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I left through the corridors of the infantry battalion's accommodation with a great hope of being able to live in a house with friends who I could talk to. We went to the house my friend talked to me about. In fact, I didn't even want to know where it was and how it was like. I really wanted to get there quickly and set up a hammock to rest a little. We headed towards the Pedra neighborhood until we reached the old neighborhood of Matina. Passing through a small wooden bridge until we reached a Pisara track, we entered a small alley and there was the house. It was a two-story wooden house right in front of a huge sewage canal with a not pleasant smell, but it was a house where everything would happen, something that would forever change my life. When we entered the house, Valois introduced his sister. She was an extroverted girl, very similar physically with the chubby and cheerful brother. I was also introduced to his colleague and his two cousins. He showed me where I in a room upstairs in which I shared with one of Valois' cousins. After we had talked a lot, I had my backpack in my room. I set up my hammock and had a great sleep, which had not happened a long time ago. The days went by and I was always thinking about the future and what I would have to do to overcome so many obstacles and so many difficulties that life presented to me. I remember that life in that place was very difficult because we all survived on a very low salary. And despite being supportive of each other there were always disagreements, so conflicts were inevitable. I was the only evangelical, the rest were Catholic. Valois' sister was a former nun and her friend too. We spoke very little. She was a very fervent Catholic. Her cousins were unknown to me. Sometimes they said some strange things about religion, but they accepted my presence well. The only one who I talked a lot about religion, faith and the Bible was Valois. We spent a lot of time talking on the subject. During my stay I met some people from the neighborhood, a very humble community, and with contact I discovered that making friends was something that would require a lot of care because on every corner there were drug spots. The area was surrounded by criminals. However, there were a lot of good and hard-working people. Despite these problems at the place, before receiving the invitation to go living with Valois, I had taken a month off after completing a year of service in the Air Force, so I decided to go to my hometown Salinopolis in the state of Para. There I met with childhood friends and it was in the midst of conversations, invitations and rounds of laughter and jokes, straight to a bed that was in the next room. I was very tired. I lay down, still a little drowsy. When I closed my eyes, I felt two strong arms coming out from under the bed. One squeezed my chest and the other one pressed my genital area. I tried to open my eyes but I couldn't do it, and even with my eyes closed, I visualized those strong black arms pulling me down and pressing themselves firmly onto the bed. The agony of not being able to open my eyes or breathe properly. I remembered Jesus Christ. Almost without strength I called out his name. At that moment those hands and that oppression released me. Still in a daze I reflected on my life and about everything. I prayed to God asking for protection, but unfortunately I still hadn't regretted my mistakes. I was still involved in that routine of a prisoner and I couldn't find liberation I needed so much. Days passed and I found myself completely far from God's path, but in my conception I thought I was still very close to Him. I never thought that I had already strayed from my belief and my ideals and principles. My great fanciful illusion was that everything I did were little sin, but nothing so serious that could not take me away from God's plans, and that was my biggest mistake. The devil and his angels were already plotting and planning his plans against me, so that God's plans in my life would be frustrated, and I simply foolishly and disobediently opened the door so that everything could happen. Yet the war was already fought and I would be the next victim of Satan's ambushes. I remember it as if it were yesterday. Everything is so clear and real. It was a sunny April morning in 1991. The day I escaped from the barracks. I was in that house with my friend Valois and company in the Matina neighborhood in Bilham. I remember that in the morning I had a normal routine in the house with Valois. We talked a lot and in the afternoon I went to the room upstairs and decided to listen to a little radio. It was actually a telephone device that had the function of alarm clock and radio, and whenever I had time I listened to music. I remember that I always put it on stations with evangelical programming even though I was deviating from God's path. Today I understand that this is the real spiritual condition I was in at the time. I would never admit it saying that I was a deviant because it is always the same attitude of escape when you deceive yourself and lie to yourself. On this day I spent the whole afternoon listening to beautiful Christian music and I was constantly reflecting about the future and about my life but not on the need to free myself from the spiritual inertia to which I subjected myself to. When night fell the other residents of the house started to arrive. So I decided to put a mattress on the living room floor. It was around at 6:30. I remember a twinge, a headache and a strong pain in my eyes that appeared out of nowhere for no apparent reason. I complained to Valois's sister and asked if there was anything in the house like headache medicine. She told me yes and wanted to get it for me. I took the medicine and I lay down on the mattress again. I remember she asked Valois what's wrong with him. Valois replied, I don't know. It seems like he's not doing very well. It's strange. I heard all that questioning and the headache was becoming more and more unbearable, and in an attitude of despair I picked up some books that were close to me and I placed it over my head and pressed it tightly in an attempt to minimize the pain. That was when the other friends asked if I was okay. I said no because I had a lot of headache and felt my body hot as if I had a very high fever. Valois's sister even asked if I wanted some tea and even checked my blood pressure. It seemed normal but I was sure nothing was normal. When returning with a cup of tea, and when drinking her tea I felt like a spirit got a hold of my mouth, said the following words, I know everything. You think that I don't know the things you did. I know everything. The spirit continued to speak. As a result this started to generate fear in everyone in the room. There were 5 people, Valois, his sister, colleague and her 2 cousins remained there, but this time they were silent and just looking. I was completely conscious and aware of the things that were happening but I had no control about my words and my attitudes. Something bigger than me controlled me, something very bad and strange. The events would get more and more serious, and when I closed my eyes I tried to open them again but I couldn't remember that I tried supernaturally to open my eyes and I couldn't. But the most impressive thing is that I could visualizing all things, as if my spirit saw the who from the roof. In truth I was already out of my body. Finally spirit that was suspended on the roof went down, and penetrated the bottom floor. I was able to see the things that were underground. I continued going down beneath the ground. I crossed a layer of the earth that gave me access to a tunnel, another world that until then I didn't know. I went down and stood up when I saw that I was completely standing surrounded by mud until I was halfway up. The mud was on my leg almost reaching my knees, and everything I visualized I was able to report to everyone who were in the room. My friends were very terrified and curious about that event. Meanwhile down there in the tunnel I was very scared without knowing what was happening. When I felt that there was someone else in that place besides me, I slowly looked to the left and had the feeling that something very bad was right next to me. Suddenly there was a noise. It was the noise of the spear crossing my left side and tearing my chest at the tip of the spear. My heart was jumping alive. One black shadow in the shape of a man, always retreating to the left side of my body, held that spear that had been thrown into the air. I saw when she suddenly sank into the mud of the tunnel. That's when the shadow told me, "Now you can wait and see what I have to show you." When I heard that voice, I saw my heart being thrown into the mud at the bottom of that tunnel that had the appearance of a dark and dirty cave. After that I no longer felt fear or any feeling. Soon after, that shadow that was always on my left side began to move to another underground level. Together with me we sank into that mud and until we passed to a lower level. What I saw at the level below was terrifying for human eyes to see. It was like a place of torment, a cave full of bodies torn apart in decomposition. I looked to my left side and again the shadow figure was there. Right in front of me was something like a waterfall coming out of the rocks of the cave, that gushed mud, dirty water and many bodies of people, living bodies broken and alive. Countless people were falling to the ground. As they fell to the ground I saw demons with hooks like those used to hang meat in the butcher shop. These hooks picked up people's remains and put them back onto the top of the waterfall, so they could fall again until there was nothing left. That scene right there on the other side was horrible. On the side there were several naked women with their backs facing fire. They were tied up side by side, held by chains on their arms and legs that pulled them to the left side towards a large flame of fire that burned their backs. Many screams and moans. They uttered great screams. When that being next to me he told me, "Do you know who they are? They are prostitutes." And then further on I saw a creature, a strange being, real dwarf, and horrible monstrous demons, who caught people and took them to a wooden block, like the one used to cut beef meat, the same. They placed people's hands and cut them with a large axe. It was an immense torment. I saw lines of ladies with heads down waiting to have their hands cut off. So the figure told me, "You know who they are, these are thieves." The scene was horrible and gruesome. There was no end. I remember clearly the moment we started heading towards another place like that cave. I continued walking with the shadow figure on my left side and I could only seeing her from the side of my eye. He was never in front of me, so we passed through a place, a kind of huge room. It was dark when I saw a mother take my arm and calmly pull me to the center of the room. The shadow that was covering me, showing everything, took me by the other arm and dragged me back to the path, and he said, "Look over there," and I saw a huge ball of black fire with legs and hand. It looked like a spider, but it had no eyes, no mouth and no head. It was just a big black ball. It was actually a man burning in great flames of hell. "That's how souls of men were burned here," the shadow man said again. "You know what that is? These balls of fire with hand and feet are your friends, who used to invite you to parties and drinks, you know." I was silent without any response. We started walking again towards the exit of that place. It was a tunnel, a cave. I clearly saw the way out, but what seemed like a way out to me was turned into many souls of torment, who like me, were involved in a demonic and deceitful bond. I saw hundreds of people lined up outside the cave. For them, the facade was like an entrance to a show, a brightly lit nightclub full of lights flashing, but little did they know what was inside was only death. When we left,